everyone. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful Friday. It is that time of the week again, where we go over all of the headlines coming out of our division from this past week. It is time for Weekly North News. There was a lot of stuff that happened this week for every team in the NFC North because we are quickly approaching the beginning of free agency, i.e. the legal tampering phase, which begins on Monday, and then the new league year starts on Wednesday. So there's a lot of things to discuss. So we're only going to do one headline for each team this week. And I'm going to start things off. For the first time in a while, the Vikings are going to get the top spot. And that is because they had some news today where, yes, they've released players and restructured and done some signings, but I think the news of the week for the Vikings really is their attendance at the Trey Lance Pro Day up in North Dakota State University, where both Rick Spielman and offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak were spotted. And not only were they there for Trey Lance, they were most likely also there for Dillon Radunz, the offensive tackle, who is projected to go in the late first, early second round, depending on who you ask. So there were some people who sort of critiqued this appearance as being just there for Dillon, the offensive tackle. And while that might be true, the only real scenario that exists where we would draft Dillon Radunz would be whether either we trade down in the first round or we somehow acquire a second round pick, because right now we don't have that. And while I think that, yes, they obviously you attend a pro day, you're going to watch all the players. I think it's more of a 50-50 split than people might want to admit, because what have we talked about in the past, right? There was the Trevor Lawrence Pro Day where he was throwing the ball and the New England Patriots went to visit, doing their due diligence because they have the 15th overall pick in the draft. It is highly unlikely they were going to be able to trade up to number 1 overall with Jacksonville to secure the rights to draft Trevor Lawrence, but they went anyway. You always want to send representatives to these big pro days, and Trey Lance is one of those guys to draw that kind of attention this year. As far as Trey Lance's pro day goes, it was done very well, organized very well, and he performed very well. Had some good throws, and he is about what we would expect for a top 5 prospect in the NFL draft at the quarterback position. Do I think that the Vikings are interested in Trey Lance? Absolutely. Why wouldn't you be? Why would you immediately cross him off your board just because you think you're set at the quarterback position? If a guy like that falls to 14 overall or 12 and you decide to make a trade up, or maybe a trade up at 11 with the Chargers, anything is possible. You don't want to go into a draft having not done all your homework. So very interesting that Trey Lance was the focus of the Vikings today. Also, for another reason, is that they didn't send any representatives to the Oklahoma Pro Day, which featured Ronnie Perkins and Creed Humphrey, who I would argue would be two prospects that they probably would want to have more interest in, considering that Ronnie Perkins is one of the top tier edge rushers in the class, slowly rising up the draft board, and Creed Humphrey is arguably the best center in the draft, who could potentially be moved to guard or even just take over for Garrett Bradbury, who has not done well since his rookie season. So that was all interesting for the Vikings. We will now move on to the Detroit Lions, and their headline of the week is that Kenny Golladay turned down reportedly $18 million in 2020, which I find fascinating because that means he really bet on himself to have a good season and hit free agency, and which he has. The Detroit Lions decided not to use the franchise tag on Kenny Golladay this week, so he will be a free agent available to sign with teams next week. And I believe, according to PFF, maybe one or two other outlets, that he is the most prized, the big time prize for free agency this time. Like, he's the number 1 ranked free agent on a lot of people's boards. So that I could see. I would think some good fits for him would be like in New England, who just re-signed Cam Newton today. Maybe in Miami, where they lack a lot of, true weapons outside of maybe Mike Gesicki, depending on who you ask. So Kenny Golladay likely on the move, and the Detroit Lions will enter free agency with, if I remember correctly, almost no wide receivers under contract, because Marvin Jones is also a free agent, as is Danny Amendola. Moving on down the list, we visit Chicago, where they have decided to make a free agent splash. No, I'm not talking about franchise tagging Allen Robinson. I am talking about giving out a big contract to, why does my note say kicker? Yeah, Cairo Santos gets 5 years, $16 million after what was a good season for the Chicago Bears at the kicker position. So they feel like they have found some steady continuity with Santos after he broke 2 franchise records last year, one for consecutive field goals made at 27 and the other for converting 93.8% of attempts. So they rewarded him with a 5-year, $60 million contract, which has the final 2 years are voidable. So really it's 3 years, $9 million with a max value of 11 if those 2 years are voided off. And some people were really quick to jump on that critique online because, you know, everybody sort of brought up Justin Tucker. Like this is something you do if you have Justin Tucker, not if you have Cairo Santos, which I thought was interesting in and of itself. So Bears fans are going to have to let me know what do you think of that roster move, because that's a lot of money for a kicker. And I just, you know, especially coming from a team where we just cut Dan Bailey, who was, I think, a $5 million cap hit. Now this seems to be, you know, a significant investment at the kicker position. But if this is really how you feel you need to address roster spots in this day and age, by all means, go for it. I mean, obviously, who am I to judge? We have lost so many games because of kickers and their goddamn inconsistencies. So I guess I really can't be too critical. And then finally, we finish off our weekly North News day with Green Bay. And they don't really have much to talk about. And I think the headline for Green Bay fans this week is, what are we waiting for, right? Because so far, they're still nearly $10 million over the cap. Aaron Jones was not tagged, was not franchise tagged. Devontae Adams is entering the final years of his contract. No extension it had to be heard of so far. And Preston Smith has a $16 million cap hit coming up this year. And that is a huge hurdle for this team if they want to make any moves in free agency. So right now, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I checked in with a couple of beat reporters, and I'm just not sure what it is they're waiting for. And we are, you know, like I said, quickly approaching the beginning of free agency. They have really until Monday to start figuring this out. And I honestly don't think Aaron Jones is likely going to be back. The A.J. Dillon investment probably makes them feel good enough to let him walk in free agency, which, on a side note, a personal opinion, I wouldn't pay big time free agent money to running backs anyway, so that might actually be something that is good for them in the long run. So that is going to do it for your weekly North News. Vikings attend the Trey Lance Pro Day. Kenny Golladay turned down $18 million and did not get franchise tagged. The Bears make a big splash in free agency, signing Chris Santos to a mega deal as far as kickers go anyway. And the Green Bay Packers just seem to be sitting around lying in the weeds waiting to strike. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.